Let's get started. Okay. Yeah, so we're quickly coming to an end of the semester, and we've covered most of the core topics of the course. So the last several topics that we're going to be covering are a little more general, that build on the skill sets that we've been discussing throughout the semester. So, for instance, today we're going to be discussing how to integrate our web project with third-party APIs. And we already have all the skills that we need, really. We do know how to create clients that can post and put and delete, send HTTP requests to servers, and we know how to respond to them. So we know how to build the both sides of a client-server application, and we know how to integrate them. But oftentimes we would like to be able to integrate with servers that we don't own or we don't control, right? And there's quite a bit of really great data sets out there, right? That other industries or companies or institutions that they control, they manage, right? They maintain, and it's great, that to be able to integrate with them. So we're going to be discussing how to integrate with one of Google's APIs. Google has tons of great APIs that we can integrate with our application that just improves or gives a great value to our application. Obviously, this is something that they maintain that we don't control. Right? And they're gracious enough to make it available for free so that we can integrate with their own application. Okay. So let's talk about the YouTube API. YouTube is just one of several APIs that are available through Google. Right? They give an API. They provide an API for most of their services. Right? Certainly to connect to their Sheets application, Gmail, right? Their Slides application. So any application that you're familiar with using through the user interface of one of their Google applications, they're all available to integrate with your application. So let's explore YouTube. And what we're going to try and do is try and integrate it with our Kambaz application. I mean, we are building an online learning management system, right, that presumably has modules and lessons about all various topics. And it just happens to be that YouTube has quite a few tutorials, right, on any number of topics. So it'd be great if we could, for instance, click on a module or lesson and tie in or search for videos that are related to those topics, and then somehow relate them, right? Make a relationship between them so that it would improve the overall content of the web application that we're building. So to be able to integrate with any YouTube API, first of all, you'll need an account, right? And we'll need to enable the API and whatnot. So we're going to go through some of the steps to be able to do that. So first, you'll need to visit their developer website, right, where you can register your application and grab one of their API keys so that we can authenticate every time we're communicating with Google APIs. So first, you'll need a Google account, right? And once you have a Google account, which I'm assuming most of you do, you can navigate to their API console and request an API key. From the developer console, you'll need to authorize and create several credentials that you can associate with any number of apps. Right? You'll need to register your particular application, right? And decide how is it that you want to authenticate, right? Either with a simple key or with OAuth 2.0. Okay, so first, we're going to grab the API key. This is one of the easiest ways that we can authenticate our application with the Google API. So first you'll need to navigate to the dashboard, the Google console dashboard. And in there, you can create applications, right? Here, I already had one already created called Note Sheets, but you can, if you don't have any application, there'll be a button to create a new application, or you can create one that already exists and then create a new one. So from here, you can you have a list of all the projects that we've been working on, right? Or you can create a brand new project from the pop-up new project. You can name it. I'm here. I'm naming it YouTube Web Dev Integration. And once you create it, you can select the project. Once it's created, you can then assign credentials to it. So if you once you've selected the project, you can go into the credentials and create the credentials. Right here, in this case, I have no keys or OAuth configured for this particular project. So you can click on create credentials, and there's several options. The simplest is the API key. That's the simplest to use. Basically, it's a token that it's generated by Google, and then you are required to provide that token in every request, right? That you send, that you post, that you get to their API, right? So that they can authenticate you and say, oh, it's you, right? Or you can do something more sophisticated like OAuth client, service accounts, but let's keep it simple. So we're going to select on API key. And once you create the API key, you can copy it, or if you forgot it, you can come back later and take a look at it. But now you are required that in every single request that you send to integrate, to talk to their API, you need to provide this key equal API key parameter, right, as a query parameter when you send out the request out to their API. And you would copy it locally into your local environment, typically either in a bash file or an environments environments variable file, right? Or we're going to be storing it in the env.development. So I'm going to temporarily stop sharing because I'm going to copy the key into a local file. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So I've copied the key into my local environment file, and now once you have the key copied in either your local bash file or somewhere safe, right? That's presumably accessible only to a system administrator. We do have to associate that key to a product, right? So this is a key that you can then share across multiple products. Right? Also, if you've copied it and you missed it, right, you can come back later to either delete the key or take a look at it and copy it again. So it's not like a one shot. Okay. Right. So once you have the key, you have to enable the various APIs that you want to use the key for, right? And you can click on Enable API, and then you can search for all the myriad of services that are provided by Google. Here I'm searching for YouTube, and I'm selecting the Data API version 3. And once you go in there, you can take a look at their tutorials. They have a lot of documentation on how to use the API key, or the API in general. But what we're going to do is that we're going to enable the product, right? The API, so that we can start using it. And then you have to select what key do you want to use with it, right? And you get a drop down that shows all the API keys that you've created, and you can associate it. Say, okay, well, I'm going to use this key for this particular product. Also, the APIs have different versions that have evolved over time, and you can specifically choose one or another version, and then select the key that you want to use for that you created earlier that you want to use for this particular product. So I'm going to use the API key 1 that I created earlier. They also have tons of documentation on how to use the API for various languages, right? For Java, JavaScript, .NET, right? Depending on how is it that you want to integrate it, right? We have a React.js client, right, which is JavaScript. So it's I follow the instructions that are explained in the JavaScript documentation. But if you want to use PHP or Python or Objective-C or whatnot, right? You can take a look at that documentation. So let's start using the URL, the API, right, to start building an actual set of screens that can interact with YouTube. So first, we'll create a search screen. So the search screen is going to allow us to type the a search term, right? Where we can search for any video, right? And when we click on search, right, it'll display those search results. Now the way we're going to integrate with the API, right, is that we're going to be sending HTTP GET requests to this URL. Right? This is straight from the documentation. So it's most of the requests come they all start with www, googleapis.com / and then the product that you want to integrate with. So in our case is YouTube, and the version of the API. So we saw that we had version 1 and 3 selected. Right here we're using version 3. Right, and then search. Right, so that's the URL, and then you can add various query parameters at the end of the URL, right, where you can provide what is it that you want to search. Presumably this is a search term that you might have typed at an input field. Right? So here we have just a simple string that says boats. So I'm searching for boats. And then the key, this is the key API key that we copied, right? And we are storing in our environment variable. So you need to provide that in every request. And that's how Google knows that it's you, right? That it has authorized you and you have permission to talk to it. Then the request that comes from this URL, it's pretty big. The response is huge. Right? I mean, there's a lot of information about that comes back from the server. So you can filter it by specifying what it is that you want. You just want the titles. You want just the video ID. You want the description. What do you want? And so one of the more common things to filter on is snippet. Snippet gives you the minimum amount of information that still is useful. Right? Includes the title of the video, the ID of the video, a short description of the video, and whatnot. Right? And so that's what we'll be using. You can say what part do you want, and you say snippet is one of the filtering criteria. And here's a sample of what you get back. Right? You get some meta information above, right? Saying how many video results are per page. It tells you, a couple of tokens, right? So that you can use this token to be able to ask for the next page, right? So that it knows that it give you certain results, and if you want to ask for the next, you can include this token in the next request. Right? It tells you how many videos match your search criteria, right? And then there's an items property that is an array that includes the 5 results, the 5 videos that are coming back from the response. Right? So the items property is an array, and here I'm showing just the first object, right, in that array, which includes quite a few things here, a lot of meta information, of which most of what we really care about is, for instance, the video ID. Right? This ID is a unique identifier right, that uniquely identifies this specific video. Right, you can copy this, right, and then paste it in a YouTube URL, right, and it'll go to that specific video. Also has a few things. He has the title of the video, right? It could be fairly long. Also has a description, which could be a couple of paragraphs. It also has a URL to an image, like a thumbnail, right, that has you have the width and the height of that thumbnail. And it also has references to the name of the channel, the title of the channel. And it's just one object, right? One video. It repeats, 5 times. Right? So there's 5 objects, as many as it says here, that there are that many in this page. Okay? Right, so what we're going to do is that we're going to create a new link, right, in the courses navigation, right, so that we can navigate to a brand new page where we can interact with YouTube. Right? So in the courses navigation, we're going to copy this link, right, of this YouTube and navigate to a new YouTube search page that it doesn't exist right now, but we'll create it. So let's see, in our React project, let's take a look at the course navigator, right, and we're going to add a new link. So course navigation. All right, so we don't have an array, right? We're just going to copy maybe the last one here, and we're going to generate a new link so that we can navigate to YouTube. So this will be YouTube. And there we go, YouTube. And so the link is to YouTube search. So YouTube/search. So let's try that out. Right? If we log in and navigate to a course, right, we have this brand new YouTube link, right, which right now it doesn't navigate anywhere. There is no page there. Okay, so let's create an actual page, that matches that particular route. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create for now, we'll create a placeholder, right, that is going to hold that a page for now that we're going to implement the search page in there. Right, so let's create a brand new directory called YouTube, and in there, create a search page. So there it is. So under courses, CID, we have YouTube search, right? And here's the page, which is currently empty, but let's put some dummy content in there for now. So that if we try to navigate there, right, there'll be an actual page. So if I click on YouTube, now we have a placeholder, okay? All right, so what we'll do is that we're going to create a client, right, so that we're going to centralize all communication to the YouTube server. Up to this point, we've been writing clients that communicate with servers that we own, right, that we control. This time around, it's going to be communicating with the client that we don't control, right? So let's create a new client file under YouTube over here, client, and we're going to load the environment variable that we created earlier. So this is the key that we created earlier, and the API is the base, right, connection to the YouTube API. Right? And what we're going to do is that we're going to use the YouTube API as the base. Right, here's the search, and the example that we saw you earlier. Right, that we want the snippet, and we're going to encode the query that we're going to pass as an argument, and we're going to pen the key at the end of the query. Okay? And we're going to call it search. We're going to pass in the query. Okay? There's no need for a cookie, right, because we're not sharing any authentication with the YouTube API. Right? It's not like the server remembers us or anything like that. Right? Right, so we have that, and so let's create in our page. We're gonna add a couple of state variables, right? That's going to allow us to type the query in an input field, and then once we send the request that goes out to the server, right, we're going to send that query out to the server. And whatever we typed on the input field, it's going to call our search function that we just wrote, right? And when it comes back, right, it's going to store the results in this array of videos. So let's copy that in our search page. Let's replace this whole thing. And when the results come back, right, we're going to iterate over it. Let me copy this, and then we can discuss this. Copy that. Let's talk about this code. Let's talk about this. So here we have an input field that we're going to be typing our search term, right, which is being it's tied to this input field here, right? That as we type the query, right, we're going to store, as we type into our state variable, right, into our query state variable, and then when we click on search, we'll have a button here, this one here, right? It's going to call search videos, which is going to use our client to send that request out to the server. The server is going to respond with an array of videos, right? And then we're going to store that in a local state variable. Once we have those videos, right? If there are videos and the array is larger than 0, right? We're going to iterate over the videos. For each video, we're going to make sure that our divs are unique, have a unique key, and we're going to use the thumbnail, right? The URL thumbnail to populate an image. Right? So for each video, we're going to create a card. This is one of the bootstrap cards. And we're going to use the title to populate the header of that card. And we're going to also populate a local paragraph with a description of the video. And we're going to create a hyperlink that goes out that will allow you to navigate to the video as it would be seen in YouTube, but also a local link, right, that navigates to a details page that doesn't exist yet, a local details page where you can see the video in an entire page, right, as opposed to a small card, right, a thumbnail, right. It'll be in its entire glory, and this is what I mean. If you take a look at one of the project options that I describe, a search page and a details page, this is what I mean, that where you have a search page that allows you to do a quick search on a term, right, and then navigate to a details page where you can see more about a specific instance, right? So for instance, here, if I search for my favorite boat, Swift Trawler 54, and do a search, right, this is the response that I get from YouTube. Right? We can see the requests go out to the server. Here, if we look at the network, right, we do the search again. I notice the request went out, right, and we can see the response that comes back from YouTube. That there are 5 results, right, and each one of these videos has its own ID, right? Has the ID, has the description, which you can see here, description display there. You can see the title, Benetos of Trawler, right? And the thumbnails for these images, right, where you can maybe create different sizes, different thumbnails, right, for different devices, right? If it's on a phone or a desktop or a tablet, right, you would use different thumbnails. And also the links, one of them navigates to the YouTube website, right, that where you can see the video right on their website, or if we can navigate backwards, did it open? Yeah, it opened up in its own tab. Or we're going to navigate to a details page that doesn't exist yet, right? And the details page will allow you to view this video, in its all, whole size, full screen, and also it would allow you to add additional information, maybe things that other folks might have searched for the same boat, right? Or maybe they like the same boat, maybe they left a comment, right? And you would mesh together the information that we are receiving from the remote server plus any information that we might have in our own database. Okay, right. So so let's take a look at that. Right there. See the sample boats just being displayed there. Right, so let's talk about the details screen. So let's talk about the details screen. Okay, so we already saw that we were able to request, right, an array of videos, right, from a search term, but we would also like to be able to retrieve information for a specific video, right? And so we have a separate URL, right? The one we were using earlier was YouTube API/search. This one is a different one, again, taken from their documentation, right? This one is /videos. And again, you can ask for different parts, snippet, and also you can ask for content details. And then you can provide the specific ID for the video that you want, right? Plus the key that has to always be added to every single request that goes out to the YouTube API. Here we have a function that receives the ID of the video as a parameter, right, that we use to build the request that goes out to the server. And this comes back with an array of items, which really there's only one. The array only really contains one. So we wrap that one object, so that for convenience purposes, that's what we return. Right? So that one object, that's what returns from this function. Notice it's async and await. So whoever uses this function must also use the async await keywords. All right, so let's create a new details page, okay, that is going to be able to render, right, the details for that specific video. So we're going to create a details page right next to our search page. And we're going to create the client, right? We need to create the client, so let's create that. Let's paste that into our client. There we go. And the video is going to use an iframe to render the video locally on the browser. Okay, there we go. So let's take a look at the code. Basically what it does is that if you click on View Details, probably need to convert this into a Use Client Details. Okay, so there's our new details screen, which renders it in a bigger screen, dedicated to that one specific video. And then you can mix it in below with information that you might have about that specific video, tied to that key or to that particular ID for the video, right? And you can store that in a database, as we'll see in a minute. And then you could have, maybe several other folks have searched exactly for this particular video, and they might, perhaps leave comments or rate the video, okay, or review the video. And so you can use that ID to tie it as a foreign key in your database, right? So this page would be a combination of information that is being retrieved from the remote API, plus any information that you might be storing in your database, right, for that specific content. Okay? So let's discuss the implementation of this page. So the detail screen, right, is reading the video ID from the params. The notice that the route, right, has VID as part of the route. Okay? So we can read the actual content that maps to that route. Right? So if you look at the URL, you'll notice that it's in the details we have the ID encoded in the URL, right? And that's what the page receives, right, when you parse it out using use params. And so what's happening here is that on load, right, use effect is if the ID of the video changes, right, we're going to cause a reload, right? We're going to rerun the fetch video details function that uses the client, right, the function that we just implemented just a minute ago, right? And it sends a request out to the server responds with details object, right? And we copied it into a local state variable, right? And we use that state variable that, if you do have a video object, right, we use an iframe, right, to encode the source and point it to the actual video, to embed that video in our web page, right? And also, we also provide another link, right, so that you can view the video in YouTube, right? So if you click on, watch on YouTube, it navigates to that video on YouTube. Plus, we have a header and a paragraph that renders the title of the video plus the description. Okay? All right. So let's talk about encoding state. So right now, our implementation suffers from a critical flaw, right? That, for instance, when we search this, notice that if I navigate back, right? If I go back, our expectation is that the videos would still be there, right? We just searched for a whole bunch of videos, and we navigated. We went. We will go forward. We go forward. Notice that the video is there. So it looks like it's able to remember that this content is here, but when we go back, it doesn't remember that we had searched for a particular term. Right? Why is that? Well, the reason is that this content, the reason this page remembers, right, when we navigate forwards and backwards, is because the information is encoded in the URL. See that? There's enough state information encoded in the URL that we can recreate the content of the page. Right? But when we go back, there's no information in the URL that we can use to recreate the page. Okay? Also, there's no state variables that we could use because we are navigating between pages. And so pages, the only way that they can share information across pages is either use some kind of reducer, right? Use Redux, or pass information encoded in the URL, perhaps as query parameters, right, or path parameters. Okay, so that's a flaw, right? We would like to be able to recreate this, but for that we need to encode enough information in the URL to be able to recreate the page. This is a very common practice, right? If anybody sends you a link, right, that ties to a product on the web, maybe something on Amazon, right, that link connects to a page that doesn't physically exist. Instead, the URL has enough information encoded in the URL, like we have here. There's enough information that it can recreate that page, right, from the information encoded in the URL. So the URL is being used as a state manager, right? It's managing the state. It's encoding enough state information in the URL, right, that the application can recreate the rendering based on that state. Right? So let's take a look at how we would be able to do something like that. What we're going to do is that we're going to enhance our search page, right, so that we can encode information in the query, right, in the query parameter, right, so that we can at a minimum encode the search term as a query parameter. And we're going to be able to read that, and once we have that, we can cause the request to go out, back to the server and regenerate, right, the search term, right, so that we can go back to the client and either us typing at the input field or a keyword that was from the search query, right? So let's do that. Let's bring in a couple of hooks in our search page. Right? So let's see. I guess we can add it to here. Right? So let's just add this to this right here. That. And we'll need use effects, not only use state, but also use effect. So use effect. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to add a query string, right, to the URL, so that when we go back and forth, right, when we navigate, right, if we search for something, when we go back, right, we'll have a query parameter right there that is going to remember what it is that we searched for. Okay? So let's see that. So we'll add a parsing of the query string. We'll do that right here. And we're going to enhance our search videos, right, so that it can either be, take the information from the input field as we type, or the query string, something that we type manually, or when we're navigating here and it's encoded in the URL. Okay? And also our use effect, right? Instead of just blindly searching for the input field that we're typing, right? If there is something in the query string, then it's going to cause a search. Okay? So we're going to say, okay, well, unload. If there is something on the search string, and if we have parsed something in the URL that has a search term, right, then we will do the query. If not, right, we're not going to do the search there. You'll have to actually type it into the input field. And it'll be the first time that you're doing the search. Okay? And also, what we're going to do is that when we click on the search link, right, instead of searching for the videos, right, we're going to cause a navigation, right, so that we're going to encode the query that we just typed in a search term, right, in a query parameter. Let's do that. All right, for that, we're going to use router, right, to push as if we navigated to it, right. So we're going to do that. And async, yeah, okay. All right. So anything else? Plus, well, actually, let's just try that for now. Right, let's try that. So let's see. So let's search. We'll say Manitou. Catamaran. 48. Search. So we have a couple catamarans. Now notice what happened here. See that? When it navigated, right, it encoded the search term that we just typed, okay, as a query parameter, right, using the router. What that does is that if we navigate to one of these, right? Say we go to navigate to the details, okay? The um, the buttons, the forwards and backwards buttons, the back button, right, is going to remember, right? When we go back, it's going to remember that query, right? And it's going to add it there. See that? It adds it there, and what we do is that we look it up. We see that there's a query, right, in the search term, and then we cause, right, the query, the search to happen again. And indeed, notice that this is going out, again to the server, right, to the YouTube API, re-rendering the page with the request that we had done earlier, right? So we can recreate the state, right, of this page now because we do have something in there. Now, a common thing that typically we want to do is that if we go to the details, right, we would like to have like a back button, right? Either obviously you have the ones that the browser itself provides, but we can also implement our own. Right? In the details screen, right, what we can do is that it could be that the video might take a bit. Right? If it's taking a while to load, we can. If there's no video yet, we can render a loading screen, and then what we'll create, we'll use a router, right? So that we'll add sort of like a back button that if we click on it, use router back, and it's going to be the equivalent of clicking on the back button, right? But we can do it ourselves, right? So here in the details page, right, we're going to create a router, right, and we'll need to import the router. And then we'll create a chevron, right? That'll be right next to the header. If we click on it, it's going to go back. Right, so we'll put this right here, like that, and we'll need to import this. I'll need to navigate back to the dashboard, okay? And go to YouTube. And so let's see. Sailboats. Here we go. So we have the URL there, encoding the search term. And if we go to details, we have a new chevron here that if we click on it, right, it does the same back button, right? And it regenerates the page, right, making the query again out to the YouTube server. Let's talk about video lessons. So let's enhance the list of lessons, right? So that we could use the name of the lessons as a search term, right? So that now we have the search here, right? We can pass it terms that we want to search by, right? By encoding the URL, we can communicate with this page by passing, right, like a parameter, right? And it will cause a automatic search, right, for that particular term. Right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to enhance our lesson button, right? Lesson control button. The if we go to the modules, right, for that particular course, all of these terms could be search terms, right? So that if we encode it, right, we can pass that term, like for instance, history of rocketry. We go back. If we send the and encode the name, right, or the title of that lesson, this would cause, right, a search for that term. So let's work on that. Let's take a look at that. Right. So what I'm gonna do is that in the lesson control buttons, right now, we have these dummy checkboxes and and dots that don't really do anything. But what we're going to do is that we're going to take the lesson, right? We're going to pass it to it, right, so that it can actually render something, right? It can use the label, the name of the lesson, to navigate to the search screen. So we're going to receive the lesson object that's going to include the name of the lesson. So let's do that. Let's see, let's add here to the lesson control button. We're going to add the lesson object so we can pass it as an argument. So the lesson control button, right now is just a simple placeholder for a couple of icons. Right, so let's make it a little more interesting. So import this. So we're going to pass it a lesson object, and that lesson object, we're going to use it to create a link, right, with a name. So let's have here, right at the beginning, I create a link over here. We're going to have to import that, and we'll have to import this too. Save that. We don't have a lesson yet. We haven't passed one yet. Right, so let's do that. Let's pass the lesson, right, in the lesson control buttons, as an argument. So that's in the modules page, I believe. It's under modules, this one. So yeah, we go, right, we go. So we're going to paste in there the lesson, pass as an argument. There we go. Let's go in here. So now notice we have a new link here that if we click on it, it's going to navigate to our search page, right? And it's going to encode, right, the title of the lesson, right, in the search term. See that? So this is searching for history of rocketry. See that? Now we can go back and click on, say, rocket propulsion fundamentals. So click on that, and it searches automatically for rocket propulsion fundamentals. All right. So great. So this can automatically do a search by passing these arguments. The nice thing that we could do is that after perusing through each one of them and watching them and saying, oh, actually, this is one of the better videos that I would like to associate with my lesson. Right? It'd be nice if we had maybe a checkbox that would allow me to store and say, okay, well, this is the default video for that particular lesson. So let's explore that. Let's add also a chevron, right, that for navigating back. Right? So because now we came to this page coming from our modules, right? So in here, it'd be nice to have like a back button that would allow us to just go back. So in the search page, right? Let's in the title over here, we can add a back with a router. I think we have the router already. Let's import that. Right, there we go. So we have a back button, and again, this back button is the same as clicking this back button. Right? So we click on it, right? It just goes back to the lessons, right, in the modules. All right. Okay, so yeah, so we like to be able to save, right, videos that we see that are appropriate to that particular lesson, right? And these videos would, at least the IDs of these videos would live in a database so that we can recover it. So as we are iterating over the lessons, right, we can have a new field in each lesson that has a dedicated video ID that we can link, right? That so that if you click on the link of the lesson, right, it navigates to that specific video. Right? So let's add in the schema that we worked on in prior lectures, right? That so that we can store this new field called YouTube ID. So on the server side, right, I believe we had created a schema, right, for the modules. So let's see, modules, we have the schema. And so let's add here for each lesson, we'll add a YouTube ID, not a string. I think I spelled it right. Okay, let's save that. And let's add, right, just to try it out, right? We'll add a dummy ID for a video. Let's search for something, anything. Let's see. So history of rocketry. Let's click on that, and let's select one particular video. Let's say this one, and let's just copy this ID over here. So that's the ID of the video. So let's go to our database, right, and associate it to history of rocket. Let's do this manually for now. Right? So what we'd like to be able to do is that when we go back here, is that this particular lesson has a link, right? Has a link that, right, if we click on this, it'll go directly to that particular video. So we'll have to store that, right? So let's do that. So let's do that manually first. So let's go to our database here. This is our our course, right, with the modules and with a lesson for history of rocket, right? This one right here, history of rocket. Let's add a new field. So we'll say edit, right? And so here I can add a new field. Say add a field called YouTube. Make sure to spell it correctly. So YouTube ID. Now let's paste the ID and let's update. Let's confirm that it's there and that we spelled everything correctly. The lesson, it's the first lesson. It's YouTube ID. Is that the ID? Yeah, YouTube ID. Very good. So ID, name, description, YouTube ID. Perfect. None of the other ones have this ID, so only this one has the ID. Okay. So yeah, so that's saved. So next, right, we're going to refactor the rendering of the lesson so that as it's iterating over the lessons, it's going to check to see if you have a YouTube ID. If you have a YouTube ID, right, the lesson name, I'm going to wrap the lesson name, right, with a link, and the lesson is, if you have an ID, right, then it's going to automatically go to the details. So that if you have an ID, right, it'll go to details and encode the ID of the YouTube ID, right, and it will display that specific YouTube video. If not, right, it'll go instead to the search page. Right? So it'll be a link in either case. Right? So if you have a right, so that either it's going to search for the for that specific name, or it's going to display that specific ID. Okay. So yeah, so let's do that. Let's replace the lesson name, right, with this logic. Let's copy that when we render the lesson name. So let's see, the lesson name that would be in our modules screen. So let's go to the modules here. So here we go. So this is the lesson, and that's the lesson name. Right, so we're going to replace this, right, with this code that have this link. But, also, we're not logged in because we had to restart the server. Right, so let's try it again. Log in again. And oh, do we have two? I guess I might have had already. Did I add it to a couple? I might have. Let's see. I added it over here. First one, did I add it to the last one? Oh, I did. This must be from our prior test that I was doing. Yeah, let's leave that. That's fine. So these you have two YouTube IDs, and notice now they render as links, right? So that if I click on them, they can directly go to the detail screen. See that this is the one we copied earlier. Right? So it automatically goes there, right? So that we can have an associated video for a specific lesson. A more interesting thing would be that you can search for, like this one doesn't have any associated videos. You can search and then maybe select one of these, right? So let's play around with that. Let's talk about how to store these video IDs into the database in the first place. Okay. So what we'll do is that we need to tell the server, right? Hey, this video ID that is associated to a specific lesson. But the problem here, or the challenge, is that the lessons is way down here inside of a module, right? One of the many modules. And the module itself is inside a course. So it needs to be able to first get a hold of the course, then find the specific module, and then within that module, a specific lesson that you want to edit. So that means that for being able to modify a specific item, I need the information about the primary keys for each one of these nested data structures. I need the ID for the module, the ID for the course, and the ID for the lesson, and then obviously the ID for the YouTube ID. Okay, and that information is just not available to me, right? When I navigate here, the only information that I have, right, is the search term, right, and maybe the course ID. I have that right here in the. So I can get that from the use params. I can get the the title that I'm searching for, but I don't have the ID. Well, actually, I do. If I look at the details here in the details, I have the ID, I have the course ID, but I don't have the module ID. Right? I don't have the lesson ID either. So I need to encode that information here so that I can, for instance, put like a save button or something, right? That I can say, oh, this is the video that I want for that specific lesson and whatnot. So I don't have that. I mean, I could store that in a router, right? In a reducer, right? And then pull that information over here. But I think it's so much easier, right, to pass just information along, right, and encode it in the URL so that we can communicate from one part of the of the application all the way down here. Okay. So let's do that. Let's what we'll do is that from the lesson control buttons, right, we already have the lesson, and we already have the course that's encoded already in the URL. We just need the module. So let's pass around, right, to the lesson control buttons, right, so that because that's where we navigate to the search. So we need to first get a hold of the first we need to go here, right? And this needs to have the information for the modules, right, and the lesson, so that when we click on it and we go to a lesson, we can then also have the lesson and the module all the way through, right? So let's do that. Let's add module ID as a parameter to the lesson control button. So let's do that. So in the lesson control button here, so the lesson control button will add module ID as a parameter. So we can pass it around, and that's going to be a string. And then when we click on the search, we'll pass both the module ID and lesson ID. And this is only so that when we select the particular movie that we want to see, we can then pass this information over to the details page, right, where we can then put a button to save this information. So we can have the information of the course, the module, and the lesson in the details. But it has to go through the search, right, because the search is the one who displays the alternate or the options of which video you actually want, right? So let's encode that in the URL and the link. So let's add that to the link. Okay, so let's do that. So in the link here, and the href, so let's paste that. There we go. And now if I save, it's going to crash because module ID doesn't receive that as a parameter, but that's fine. We'll fix that. And so we need to pass it along in the module page, right? We need to pass the module ID over to the lesson control because it's expecting it now, right? So let's go back to the modules here, and the lesson notice is complaining that it doesn't have a module. Pass in the module ID, perfect. Save that. And let's try it out. Let's try it out. Let's see. So now, right, back to the modules. And notice that before, when we clicked on one of these, right, we didn't have the information. We only had the search term. See that? But now, not only do we have the search term, but now we have the lesson ID and the module ID also encoded in the URL. See that? Plus, obviously, we have the course ID. So we have all three information to pass along to the server. Say, hey, server, there's the ID of the course, the ID of the module, the ID of the lesson, and the ID of the video. We don't have that yet, right? We'll have the ID of the video when we navigate to the details page. We'll have all four information: the course ID, the module ID, the lesson ID, and the video ID, right? And all of that information will then be able to pass over to the server. We don't have that information just yet, right? If we click on the details doesn't have anything, right? It only has the video ID and the course ID. It's missing the lesson ID and the module ID, right? To send over to the server so that we can save all this information on the server. Okay. So yeah, so it encodes it correctly. Right now it's encoded in there, perfect. All right, so now let's in the search screen, we have that information in the URL. Let's parse that out, right? So that we can have it available in our code. Right? So let's do that in our search term, in our search screen. Right? We know that they're passing this information along, right? But we have to parse it out. So let's parse it out. We already were parsing the search right underneath here. So we now have those two things. And what we'll do is that we will encode, right, we will encode when we navigate to the detail screen. We're going to append, right, the module ID and the lesson ID along with the video ID, right? So that's in the detail screen link. Here's where we go to the details. Not only are we going to pass in the ID, but we're going to pass in also the module ID as a query string, right? And the lesson ID. Lesson ID. Is that what I called it? Lesson ID? Yes, lesson ID. Oh, okay, yeah, correct. There we go. Okay, so now notice that the details doesn't have the module ID and the link ID. But let's try again. Let's go back. And let's go to details again. Now the details should have, there it is, right? The module ID and the link ID. Now we have everything, right? We have the video ID, the module ID, the lesson ID, and we have our course ID. We have everything to send this information over to the server and manipulate that specific course, module, and lesson, right? And add a new YouTube ID property that has the ID of the video. Okay. Yeah, so now we have everything that we need encoded in the details. And DSquared now has all the information that we need. Okay, so on the server, right, we need to we're going to post to the server, and we're going to pass all this information. We're going to pass in, hey, I want to add the video ID to a lesson whose ID is this, to a module, to a course, right? So, logically, these are all contained inside of each other. I first tell you the parent course, then within that course, I give you the ID of the module. Within that module, I give you the lesson. And then within that, right, I'm giving you the ID of the YouTube video that I want to associate, right, to that lesson. Okay. And I'm going to post this to the server. Right, we're going to pass in all these parameters, right, from the detail screen. We're going to save it. We're going to have a new button that we can save and pass all this information. So we'll do this in the client. So in the client, right, we're going to have a save YouTube video for lesson. I'm going to pass all this information. I'm going to send it over to the server. Okay. And we're going to do this all in the client, right? In the detail screen, we're going to parse out from the search parameters, right, from the query at the end. Right, so we'll grab that right, from the details screen. So details, there it is. Let's see. Right now, we don't have any search parameters. We haven't been using any search parameters, so we'll have to grab the the hook, right? And we'll need to import that. So now we have the module ID, the lesson ID. We'll need the course ID also from the encoder in the path. So CID. There we go. And now we have everything, right? We have the course ID, the video ID, module, and lesson ID. All the information that we can now send over to the server. So when we have that information, we're going to add a new button, right? That calls our video client, right? Our YouTube client, and pass in all that information over so they can be posted to the server. Right? And then once we save it, we can go back to the modules. Right? And the modules now, when it fetches the modules from the server, right, it'll have this new lesson within the ID. It'll show it as a link. Right? So let's add a new save button here in the details screen that is going to call this function. And the client, actually, it's called YouTube client. The course ID, I think these are all strings. String. Yes, it wants me to type each one of these. So let's do that. These are all strings. There we go. And we'll add a new button plus a back. Do we have a back button? We do. Okay. So let's add right after the back button. We'll add a new button that we can do the save. So we'll add it here. See the button looks pretty ugly. Maybe we can dress it up a little bit. Say class button says, maybe put again. There we go. And so this would go out to the server, right? But the server right now is not ready to receive this information, right? So before we try it out, right? Let's write the server side, right? On the DAO for the modules, right? We have a whole bunch of functions that we can create modules, find modules, delete modules. Let's add a new save YouTube video for lessons, right? So let's grab that, right? And on the server in the DAO for the modules, right, we'll add a new function that can, if we pass it the ID of the course, the ID of the module, the lesson ID, and the video ID, it'll use the course ID to retrieve the module, the course from the database. Then within that course, right, it's going to find the module with the ID. Once you have the module, it'll find the lesson with the ID of the lesson. Right? And then finally, we can manipulate that particular lesson by adding a new field YouTube ID, with the video ID, and then save the whole thing back to the server, right, to the database server, right? And we're going to export this so that we can use it from the router, right? So from the router, we're going to receive a post. So here's the post that we're going to send from the client. We're going to receive the post that is expecting the ID of the course, the module ID, the lesson ID, the video ID, all encoded in the URL, right? And so let's add this to the module route. Module route here. So we'll add it like right here. And so we're going to parse that information from the URL, right? And then just pass it along to our DAO, right? To actually manipulate the database. All right. All right. So I think we're ready. Let's see. Anything else? We should be able to try it out. Right. So this was the rocket propulsion basics. Let's see. And what modules? Okay. So this one, rocket propulsion basics. If we go there, right, and then go here, the details. We have a new button here. We can inspect and make sure that we are posting it. We don't have any errors here. So let's save this. Save. And okay, give us a 404. Let's see what the client header Oh, it's the wrong URL here. Okay, so it looks like we need to massage this the client a little bit. Okay, so we're not using the API for the courses, so we'll need to copy that from another client from the courses. So we'll grab this code here, paste it for a new client. There we go. And then instead of API courses, right, this is, yeah, course API like that, right? So we want to go to the server, not to the client. Okay, let's try that again. Let's clear that out. All right, so let's save again. Okay, so there we go. So this time around, we did the post, went out to the server, right, and it responded saying, yeah, it's done. And notice that indeed, we do have an ID for that YouTube video so that we can click on it and navigate to that specific ID. There we go. And we should be able to go back to the database and confirm, right, that our third lesson, you notice that we need to refresh, right? So this lesson over here didn't have a YouTube ID, this rocket propulsion fundamentals. But if we refresh, we go out to the server and retrieve that information from the server again, right? That lesson hopefully now does have indeed a YouTube ID. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and this is just confirming that the whole flow works.